The Hard Talk with Jakim Show.
The Hard Talk with Jakim Show.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions of DIN Media Studios. Any questions or concerns about what is said should be directed to the show host or producers. Thank you and enjoy. Peace and blessings. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Can't get enough of the Hard Talk with Jakim Show? You can email us at btom6164@gmail.com. That's bthomp6164@gmail.com.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The views expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any and all legal matters.
They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much. That is why our country and our world has become so proliferated with entertainments, mass media, game shows, television shows, amusement parks, drugs, alcohol, and every kind of entertainment to keep the human mind entertained, so that you don't get in the way of important people by doing too much thinking. You had better wake up and understand that there are people who are guiding your life and you don't even know it. And all American citizens, I think, have suspected something like this is going on. But we're all too busy trying to stay alive and live our lives. And after all, what can one person do?
Peace and blessings, family. This is Jakim with the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Yes, I'm coming at you on a great Friday, August 23rd. Yes, we're almost there, family. Fall is right around the corner. We're going to have most of the kids will be going to school. If you're watching this in the South, they've already started. Wow. All I got to say is wow. Listen, we labeled this loons, goons, and buffoons. So we've got a great show for you tonight. I want you to put your listening ears on or watching with your reflective eyes. I want you to understand the information we're going to give you tonight are going to be some information that you should know already. But if you don't know it, I'm going to give it to you. So let me just give you this, y'all. Peace and blessings to everybody out there that has been contacting us, and people been trying to contact about the Delaware Black Commission. Big shout outs to all of those that participated, that took those surveys and endorsed those candidates. So I think they got a couple of more candidates that are going to be endorsed this weekend. Check it out. Listen. We watched the DNC. I watched, oh my God, it was excruciating to watch the Democratic National Convention. It wasn't as bad as the Republican, the RNC National Convention, but boy, did we get some entertainment. Very little substance, very little stuff on policies, but we've got some entertainment for you. Yes, the DNC is over. The RNC is over. You know, to see that buffoon Hulk Hogan rip his shirt saying he's going to vote for Trump is not surprising. From the RNC, whatever you want to call that thing that had, or what you had the DNC. It was great for me to see Michelle Obama. It was great to hear some of the great speeches that they got. Some of them were great. Some of them were poo-poo. Some of them was ridiculous. I really didn't need to see D.L. Hughley up there. comedians get up there and they do their shtick. But what I really meant and what we all understand is that these conventions aren't about policy, are they? They're not really about how we're going to uplift the most downtrodden of us, how we're going to have equal power in our society. Not about that. It's about entertainment. Now, I watched Kamala Harris' speech yesterday, and actually I taped it, I DVR'd it. Good speech. For a lot of people, might have moved a lot of y'all. Did nothing for me. Good speech. If you like Donald Trump's speech, they play to their audience. That's what they do. That's why we even have these conventions. Well, let me just say this. Let me just go back into the history. There were some conventions, in fact, in that same great city of Chicago. Big shout outs to Chicago. Earlier this month, I had to fly through to Chicago, Midway. Big shout out. There were some great speeches that were put on the floor, like from Fannie Lou Hamer, her great speech in the 1960-something convention at the Democratic Party, when she was saying, y'all don't even want us here. And she's talking about black folks in the party. So I'm going to tell you what I've heard in the DNC this week. What I heard mostly was the same old chit-chat that we've heard for the last 30, 40 years coming from the Democratic Party. We haven't heard anything new out the DNC. Now, let me just go back and let me get real local. You've heard me on this show talk about the terrible Delaware Democratic Party leadership that we have here. Terrible leadership. Trying to handpick particular people, endorsing particular people. They have that right. But let me just say this. I've been involved in the Democratic Party here in Delaware for almost 20 years. This is the worst I've ever seen it. But I'm going to say this also. It's the worst I've ever seen it because my eyes was truly open. The Democratic Party here in Delaware is laughable. Laughable. If it wasn't so damn serious. It would be laughable. That's what I meant to say. Our educational system is terrible. I just had on a post. Y'all saw the post of me today with Newark. What's going on in the Christiana School District? Superintendent fired, this or that, school board, accusations, cease and desist letters all over the place. The NEKC saying that we ranked in the 30s of the foundation. And yet the same person who is responsible for this, the governor of Delaware, now wants to run for mayor. Now, let me just say this. If I have one thing that I can say perfectly great about our President Biden, is that he knew when to sit down. Our governor here doesn't know when to sit down. He had his 8 years. He had his 8 years as lieutenant governor. He had his years as congressman. He's had his years. Sit down. Unless you don't want to sit down because you don't want other people to have power in Wilmington, the largest city in Delaware. It's time for him to sit down. But I digress. Let me get back to the Delaware leadership here. This Delaware leadership is terrible. 100% terrible. And let me just say this. They try to say that they're not like the Republican Party. They're worse than the Republican Party. They're the fox in the hen house. They get invited to, let's say, churches for debates. And I'm going to get back to that one. You heard me right. Churches in political debates in churches run by colonized so-called black organizations in Delaware. Hey, I ain't gonna name them out. Y'all know those organizations. I'm gonna name probably, I'm gonna tell you what they do. I ain't gonna name them out, but I'm gonna tell you what they do. The colonized organizations that are supposed to help black people in Delaware are atrocious. These things are a travesty. They would be, again, it would be laughable if it wasn't that serious. So let me just go back. So again, most of these organizations are going to go to bat. Now we're going to talk about all those turncoats. We're going to talk about all those sellouts, all those collaborators. But we're going to get one thing really straight. We're going to get one thing really straight. And big shout outs there. We got Mr. Joshua Stone and we got Josie Roy. Big shout out to you, Josie. Yeah. How you doing, baby girl? We got one thing straight about Delaware. Delaware has such a brutal racial past. To be the second smallest state in the union, we have such a brutal racial past that we have not rehabilitated ourselves from that racial. That's the reason why we have this problem. Let me tell you something, and I'm going to tell y'all really important. The only reason you're hearing about Delaware school system being so bad, and I'm talking about the public school systems, and I'm talking about even some of the private and charter schools. They're terrible. Believe you me, like good friends of ours that are teachers, a lot of these private and charter schools, they don't even require a lot of the teachers to have half of the training that they require for the public schools. So evidently they got terrible curriculum too. But you wouldn't hear it. You would not hear a word about it if it wasn't for some of the white schools are just as bad. Some of the rich people who are charter schools who are paying money are just as bad. And then, out of the blue, the governor who has been in charge of all of this stuff, now we're going to open up the first school in Wilmington in years for his run to try to be the mayor. Every other governor wants to be a senator or something or run for president, because didn't Tim Walz, wasn't the vice president Kamala Harris just name a governor? Everybody else is running for bigger office. He's running for mayor. He's going back down because anything he could have done for Wilmington, he would have done for Wilmington. But yet, we've got black collaborators voting for that nonsense. You know why? Y'all know why. Look at the endorsements he got. That's right, Josie, you're right. Look at the endorsements of the collaborators. Look at the endorsements of the turncoats. They got one turncoat. The son is running for something. Turncoats didn't do nothing for black communities here. If you vote for this fool, you are showing us exactly what you are. And let me tell you something. Make no mistake about it. We are going to expose you. All right, y'all. I'm gonna be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Let me see. I'm gonna pick up on something. I want you to understand this. This is a big shout out. We got a friend of ours from Germany. Big shout outs, Birgit. She actually is in New York City now. It's Queen Mary or whatever. Yeah, the Europeans are watching what we're doing, and we're watching what they're doing. If you haven't seen those riots that's going on in the UK, I'm going to give you a little bit of back history. I'll be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Peace.
There's always so much sympathy for folks like that. People say, well, I have a cousin who feels that way. She's not so bad. My aunt voted for Donald Trump, and she's a nice person. My mother supports him. She doesn't like his tweets, but she's not terrible. Here's the news flash. Your aunt, your mother, your grandmother, whoever supports that philosophy, they actually are terrible people. That actually is garbage when you support racism. It doesn't matter how related you are. But we extend humanity to folks like that, and so little humanity for folks who look like us. When you
Peace and blessings, y'all. This is the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Listen, I'm getting very raw today, and we're going to have a great show. I'm going to give you two things also. So if you have not watched it, and I had to discuss this with my father, if you have not watched it, there's some riots going on in the conflict zone, better known as the United Kingdom. Yes, I call it the conflict zone because guess what? We're the same thing. The United States in a couple of years will be what we call a conflict zone. This is made by the people in power to stoke resentment and racial hatred. So to make it a conflict zone, as long as y'all start staying at each other's throat, y'all can't get any real policies and real stuff to advance humanity. Yes, the UK is having some riots over there. Well, if you call them riots, and listen, a lot of people have said this, and I'm just going to repeat what they've already said. I've always told you, there ain't nothing new under the sun. We've seen it, that movie before. We've done that movie before. A lot of times, everything we're doing is regurgitated anyway. So in the UK, they're having these riots where people are white nationalists are out there fighting with the police. They're not fighting like we are over here, trying to physically fight against immigrants or people of color or people who are Muslim or people who are, no, they're not. They out there fighting with the police with the ability to be able to express their white nationalism. Now, a lot of times it's po-whites out there that's doing it. But don't get it twisted, y'all. You know that they get their marching orders, their money from higher ups. And it's the higher ups that are using all of us. That is correct. It is the higher ups that are using this to stoke racial tension and immigrant. It feels like, oh, we're losing our white culture. We're losing our culture of whatever exclusiveness. And let me just say this to all of my brothers and sisters in the UK, here in the United States, here in the state of Delaware, Georgia, Louisiana, Nevada, and New Jersey, any other places that we are, I'm going to tell you for the first and last time, when I see somebody get up on one of these social medias and say they are so surprised, like they're having trauma about it, like they can't believe this is going on, I really want to slap them, but we wouldn't do that. I really want to say, when are you going to wake up? This has been their identity. This has been the identity. And it's all about power. Power, power, power. Now put that back on your thing, y'all. Power, power, power. When they say they are reasserting their heritage and their culture, what they're talking about is the most brutal parts of their heritage and culture, which allow them to keep power and wealth. That's what it's about. Now, somebody said, oh, it's about the money, it's about the money, it's about power, it's about wealth, wealth, wealth. And I say, yes, yes, yes. You are halfway there. But if you want to get all the way there, it's only about one thing. It's always been about one thing: power. And the lack of brown and black folks and poor white folks and Hispanics and Latinos and everybody else out there who have a lack of power. Period. It's always about power. Frankly, I can't even understand how you could convince yourself that it was anything other than power. How you can convince yourself you're living in a civilized society. I don't know how you can. I really don't. You see it every day on the news. You see it every day when you walk out in the street. You see it every day when you get on the train, bus, or plane. You see it every day when you get in your car. You see it every day. I don't know how you could be so delusional. But I will say this. If you are shocked by the riots that are happening in the UK, and you were not shocked by the Proud Boys in the United States during 2020, 21, 22, and 23, or even this year, or shocked how a man like Donald Trump could have ever been president of the United States, then I want you to give me all your money. Y'all can send your money. If you're shocked by it, please send me your money. You can send it to btom6164@gmail.com or send it to our Cash App at Jakim Muhammad, because you must be on stupid juice if you are shocked by these so-called riots. And yes, I'm going to take something from somebody else. In their minds, they don't even call it riots. They call it festivals. Sounds familiar, right? KKK, Aryan Nation. They don't call it riots, they call it festivals. It's the same playbook. Nothing's changed. All right, y'all, I'm going to be right back with let me go get some water. I see we got some comments. I'm going to go through some of your comments. This has been the Hard Talk with Jakim Show, and we're right back with the Hard Talk. Peace.
Is there anything that could happen with him indictment-wise that would say, all right, maybe this disqualifies him for president?
Not for me. I'm with him to the finish.
All right, thank you so much.
He could stand on the front steps of the White House and commit murder, and I'm with him.
Every luxury brand has a range of products especially for the poor. And that brings us back to the question, why are brands like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga, and Hermes so popular with the poor? Well, the answer is psychological. In fact, every luxury brand has two product categories. A clothing category that will be accessible to the general public, with very flashy clothes that make the logo stand out. Luxury brands have in fact understood that the poor absolutely want to show that they are wearing luxury because they need to prove their values to others. And a second category reserved for the very rich with simple, discreet clothes. You don't even recognize the brand of the garment. Once again,
peace and blessings, y'all. This is the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Listen, man, I'm having a great time. We actually had a great week. We was all over the place. Big shout outs to the wifey. Big shout outs to the family member. Big shout outs to all y'all. Listen, I see we got a comment from a good friend of the show, Mr. Alvin Ruley. And yes, Alvin, let me hit you on this, Russ. America is blind to the realities of oppression. That's what Alvin said. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Hughley's Joshua Stone said Hughley's message was, before you criticize, do your research, and it showed how to apologize when wrong. You know, let me just give you this, Joshua Stone, and I'm going to address the Hughley controversy. He's been in the game way too long for him to make simple mistakes like this. Believe you me, I do not believe in those types of mistakes. For the most part, they are it almost like when you do PR mitigation, you say something stupid to get a lot of clicks. And when you get a lot of clicks and it was something stupid and you had a little backlash, you apologize and play the victimization. Now, you could fall for it. You could like it. You could go for it. I personally don't. One of the things that I have found is that you can't trust these people. When I say these people, I'm talking about collaborators. I'm talking about turncoats. I'm talking about slave makers. Now, here in Delaware, let me bring it regional, and then I'm going to bring it national and global. But let me just bring it regional right now in Delaware. in Delaware, we have some people that have been known to be civil rights or civic advocates. And for years, if you know me and you know my show, we have been pushing that these people aren't civic advocates. These people are not civil rights advocates or community advocates. What they are your classic, everyday, wannabe people who's looking for a job. Quite simple. These turncoats have been, and listen, it goes the same way for celebrities. It goes the same way. In Delaware, there have been some people, well, there have been some civic advocates that shouldn't even open up their mouth because all you hear is insanity coming out of them. And then the other ones are just pitching for people in power because they're looking for a job. Well, the difference between it, I'm not looking for a job. I can't care less about working in the type of government thing. Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. But these people are looking for jobs. It's just the same old, same old. All collaborators are looking for jobs. Looking for how to get a little bit of money. Look at it. That's the reason why they keep running and running and running for an elective office, or keep going to be with the people who are maintaining the status quo. The status quo doesn't work for everybody. It mostly only works for very few and gives the shaft to everyone else. You know that. All right, so there's a difference between policy and practical. You know, you can have a lot of policies out there, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty of making sure you implement it, that's a whole different story. That's the practical. I'm going to just talk to y'all real quick about Christianity. In fact, if you're still on, chime in about if you live in the Newark area, in Wilmington area, and you see this crap that's going on with the Christiana School Board, superintendent, and everybody else. Chime in. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes before I do that. But while we do that, let's go to origin. All right. Okay. All right, see, we got a comment. We talked about the UK. We're talking about all these conflicts that are in. Yeah, that's right, Josie. Yes, they try to think that. Listen, there is very few black people in the state of Delaware that can speak for me. Very few. When I say that very few, I say put it on one hand, 5 fingers. And Miss Josie can speak for me. That's my sister from another mister, so she can speak for me. If she speaks for me, that's all right. But very few of them. Yes, you're right. They actually act like they speak for the black people, the black community here. The black community that is suffering in Delaware. Don't make any mistakes about it. The black community in Delaware is suffering. Whether you're down in Georgetown, I've got a young lady who's talked about the racism in her high school down in Georgetown, whether it's in Middletown, whether it's in Smyrna, or the largest city in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, the black community has been suffering. Yet, Delaware done had Joe Biden as its vice president of the United States for 8 years. Had him president for 4 years. We've had conventions here. We've had stuff where the national media has focused on Wilmington, Delaware. Not Wilmington, North Carolina, but Wilmington, Delaware. And yet, the black community here gets absolutely nothing. We get nothing candidates that are handpicked by the elites, the power structure to be. We get luxury apartments and condos in Wilmington, and we can't get our trash cleaned up on Pine Street. This is the reality of Delaware. Let me tell you something. I want y'all to do your research. That's what D.L. Hughley said. Evidently, he didn't take his own message, so don't get up there and talk that. Do your research. Look at the history of this great state. Look at the history of how it's treated its black residents here. Let me just say this before we go on our next break. And that's right. A good friend of ours, Mr. Herman Holloway Jr., died a couple of months ago. And he was in politics here. His father, Herman Holloway Sr., definitely big in politics here. And one of the reasons that I always respected Herman, and big shout out to Herman Holloway's family. If you know Herman Holloway's family, let them see it. I always got big shout out for them. But one of the things that he told me years ago when I was running, I ran for a state representative 2018. And he told me, he said, listen, Jakim, I'm going to be honest with you. They needed you down there to shake this crap up. We've got not one person down there from the black community that is shaking up Delaware's representatives, Delaware Senate. What we got there is just straight up puppets. What we got there is status quo people. When my state representative, supposedly, and remember, I am not your constituent. You are my servant. If you are an elected official, you are a public servant. You ain't a celebrity to me. If I want to be entertained, I'll go to a show. I care nothing about political entertainment. What I care about is policies, period. Get stuff done. But yeah, our state senator automatically endorsed him in our district. Terrible state senator. Terrible. Just terrible. But this is what a lot of people have voted for. I remember when I was 16 years old, I realized that we did not live in a democracy. So anybody who thinks that we live in a democracy, you can get that nonsense out of your head right now. All right, y'all. So listen, I was just going to do a short show. Let me just say this before we get out of here. What I'm getting ready to say is going to offend some people. And I don't mind offending some people. And peace and power to everybody about who actually going to understand what I'm going to say. Human beings are the problem. We are our own worst enemies, aren't we? Doesn't matter what religious faction you come from, what so-called cultural divide you come from. We are our own worst problem. And in my book, the worst thing that we can do is be stupid, naive, and manipulated by those in power. I'm going to be right back with my final thoughts for the Hard Talk with Jakim show. I'll see y'all on the flip side, all right?
Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. When you stay silent, you allow wrongs to continue unchallenged. Your voice is a weapon. Use it. Think about what sets your soul on fire. Equality, justice, human rights. Fight for these. Don't wait for others. Be the one who steps into the fray, who shouts the truth. Crush fear and complacency. Every time you speak out, you shake the foundations of oppression and inspire others to join you. Don't be a bystander. Be a warrior for what's right. The time for action is now. Be relentless, be fierce, and let your voice thunder against injustice."
All right, Joe. Yeah, this is our last segment today on the Hard Talk with Jakim, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of my commentary about the DNC, about the RNC, and about some of the candidates that we have here in Delaware. But before I do that, I told you I was going to talk about the loons, coons, and the buffoons. Let me go to a local issue. There should never, ever, ever be a political debate inside of a church. And thank you, Carmela Crawford. You're absolutely right. We are the worst. You know, we talk about how bad animals are, and don't get me wrong, animals are terrible. That's why we call them animals. When somebody says you act like an animal, that's not a high praise. They're telling you that the animal kingdom is terrible, and we're worse than them. Yes, you're right. There should never be a political debate inside of a church. Well, there was a political debate for mayor a couple of weeks ago inside of the church out there in Southbridge, and ran by the same old flunkies, same old mammies, same old sellouts and Toms and all the other stuff. And don't talk to me about Uncle Tom is the good guy. We already know that. It's just word. Same old. There should never be a political debate inside of a church. Because when you start with that, let's honor all the people who are preachers, and you get them to stand up, and let's talk about this and look, that means that you are not a welcoming place. Churches aren't welcoming places. There are a lot of members of our society that do not feel welcome inside of a church. And when you have a political debate inside of a church, you are telling me that the church is now part of the government. Now, I told you before, I don't remember any branch of the government. I remember executive, I remember judicial, and I remember the con. I don't remember church being a part of the government. So here it is, 2024. Can we stop having political debates inside of churches? And let me just go one step forward further. If you bring those mutts into your church, you should lose your tax exempt. Every church that doesn't should lose their tax exempt. They should be paying taxes on that land, on that building, and on that money that they got coming in. When you make it a political debate inside of a church, the one place that is not welcoming to everyone. Now, I respect everybody's ability to love everything. I respect everybody's ability. I respect everybody's ability to worship whoever they want to. I respect everybody's thing. But let's keep that separate. Let's keep political and church separate. When you want to do something that is for your church, that's political, especially for a candidate, it needs to be outside of that church. If you want young people to think you're about, that's why these churches are losing so many people. Half of these churches will not be here in less than 40 years because young people ain't going. They see your phoniness. They see it. I get it on my TikTok every day. They see the phoniness of church. And yet we had a debate inside of a church and the lady gets up there. Can we see all the pastors in the house? What the hell has it got to do with a political debate? This is about policy. This is about government. And it should not be held in the church. Let me speak on it. And then organizations gonna get out there. Nah. You can take that mammy stuff someplace else. It's not for Jakim. Not at all. So let me just go and finish this up. Wow, I wasn't expecting to be on this long, y'all. And y'all have some great things. Big shout out to all the people that joined in. We had Josie Roy, Alvin Ruley. We had Carmelo Crawford. We had Mr. Joshua Stowe. Thank you for chiming in. Yeah. I wanted to be here. Next week, we're back with guests. I've got a great guest for you next week. He's going to talk about his position. Doesn't mean that I always agree with it. I've had Republicans on this show. I have Democrats on this show. I have independents on this show. I've had libertarians on this show. So we actually going to have some more guests next week. But I needed to talk about this and finish up with the DNC and finish up with local. All right. So let me just keep on in. Kamala Harris. Why do I think Kamala Harris is going to win? Here's why I believe Kamala Harris is going to win. Have you noticed how many elites are now supporting Kamala Harris? I heard the owner of Netflix said he support Kamala Harris. This is a sharp change from less than a month ago when none of them was supporting Biden. But let me just say this. When the so-called elites start supporting you, as we say in the gambling world, might be the fix is in. But I will say this. As bad as Kamala Harris' record, or as good as her record, because she does have some good things on it, she has some bad things, like most people. It would still be a 10 times better choice than the lying, thieving, full-time, kids lying, stealing, Donald J. Trump. When you come from New York City or come from the surrounding areas of New York City, and when you know what Donald Trump has been in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when you know he just lies, you know you can't vote for him. He ain't even a choice. I tell you, the biggest problem that the Republican Party had this election cycle is not getting somebody other than Donald J. Trump. Yes, they had their little... They had all those almost 20 people and then it went down to 10, then it went down to 5 and 2. They had those people. But most of them were still catering to Donald J. Trump. And that's a bad thing for the Republican Party. You said it. A big shout out to Alvin. And yes, Jesus said, give Caesar what is Caesar's and give God what is God. And that's a paraphrase. You're absolutely right. You can go for that. We've got to get this out. And let me just say, just to expound on it, I'm not the first person that said this. There's been many people that's been saying when these preachers and when these Christian nationalists down in the South, mostly white churches, are expounding the virtues of Donald Trump, which are in conflict to the Bible, or maybe it is part of the Bible, they should lose their tax exempt stamp. I mean, Lord, they're always crying that they broke. Well, when these preachers and these people get into this political realm and do it from the pulpit, they should lose their tax exemption. Well, y'all, it's been nice having y'all tonight. Remember, next week, I think we got 2 or 3 shows next week. So remember, if you want to keep in contact with me, you can contact me at btomp6164@gmail.com. That's btomp6164@gmail.com. And if you believe that the status quo is what we need for Wilmington, then y'all going to keep doing what y'all always do, and you're going to get what you always get. I'm about power. If you don't have power, you don't have nothing. Again, y'all, this has been the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Let me leave you with this about Messenger. Please pay attention to the message more than the messenger.
Separate the message from the messenger. And you will find out that all of them, there is so much truth behind it.